The village where Ravi was born was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's name, yet large enough that gossip traveled faster than the wind through the trees. It sat beside a dense green forest, the kind that began with tall, friendly tamarind and mango trees at the edge, but turned into a dark tangle of bamboo and ancient trunks. Once you stepped further in, here, mornings began with the sound of roosters and the smell of wood smoke curling from clay stoves. Afternoons were for labor in fields or tending animals, and evenings gathered the villagers under yellow lamps, telling stories before sleep. Ravi was 9 when his lesson in kindness began. Not the kind you are told about in stories, but the kind you discover in a moment so small it almost slips past you. One autumn morning, as Ravi trudged to school along the dusty road that skirted the forest, he swung a small cloth pouch in his hand. Inside were 3 round rotis, a bit of pickle, and a handful of roasted peanuts his mother had tucked in as a surprise. It was a lunch he was already looking forward to. The sun was still low, sending pale light between the trees. Sparrows hopped about on the road, hunting for crumbs. About halfway to school, Ravi heard a faint, uneven flutter above him. He looked up to see a small bird, a mina, wobbling midair before tumbling into the grass by the roadside. Ravi froze for a moment. The bird lay still, one wing bent at an odd angle. Its dark eyes blinked slowly, chest rising and falling like it was carrying the weight of the whole world. Ravi had never touched a wild bird before. He was afraid, not of it attacking him, but of doing something wrong. Behind him, 2 boys from his class approached and stopped. "It's injured," one said. "Leave it," the other shrugged. "It'll either fly or something will eat it." That's how the forest works. They walked on. Ravi remained standing over the small creature. His stomach reminded him of the lunch waiting in his pouch. His mind whispered, "Just go. You can't help it." But then he remembered his mother's words when she cooked meals for sick neighbors during last year's monsoon. When someone is weaker than you, that is when your strength matters most. Kneeling down, Ravi gently scooped the bird into his hands. Its tiny body trembled against his palms. In the forest ahead, he could hear the occasional call of other birds, but this one made no sound. He opened his pouch and tore a small piece from one of his rotis, crumbling it softly onto the ground in front of the mina. The bird only looked at him, exhausted. Ravi then noticed the bottle of water the school gave each student. He unscrewed the cap and wet a corner of his scarf, holding it near the bird's beak so it could sip. It drank, just barely. Encouraged, Ravi set it gently in the shade under a tamarind tree, away from the path, food and water beside it. By the time he reached school, his stomach was already growling from having given up half his lunch. But strangely, the hunger felt lighter than usual, softened by a quiet satisfaction. When his friends saw him eating only a few peanuts, they asked why. "I gave some to a bird," Ravi explained simply. The boys laughed. "You'll go hungry because of an animal. Birds don't need your roti. They'll find worms." Ravi felt a flicker of embarrassment, but pushed it away. He didn't try to explain. It wasn't about whether the bird needed his help. It was about the fact that it was in front of him, helpless, and he could give. 2 days later, on his way to school, Ravi slowed near the same tamarind tree. At first, he thought the bird was gone. Then, from a low branch, came a familiar flicker of feathers. A small mina, hopping lightly, its wing noticeably straighter. It looked at him for a moment, head tilting as if in recognition, then flew off into the forest with an easy, confident motion. Ravi smiled the whole way to school. He didn't tell anyone. Some moments are better kept in the soft box of your own heart. Years passed. Ravi grew taller, his legs stronger from work in the fields. He still walked the same dusty road, but often with others now, carrying grain or tools instead of a school bag. Life in the village was never easy. Some harvests were generous, others much less so. Through all of it, the memory of the bird stayed with Ravi, not as a dramatic story, but as a quiet reminder. When you meet need, give what you can. even if no one knows, even if it costs you. It became a habit, stopping to carry an old neighbor's heavy basket, sharing food with travelers, giving away an extra blanket on cold nights. Many times people told him, "You're too soft, you'll end up with nothing for yourself." But Ravi found that, somehow, kindness always carried something back. Not always in things, but in trust, friendship, and the peace of looking in the mirror without regret. One year, a bad drought gripped the region. Wells sank low, crops failed, and the river ran as narrow as a thread. Water tankers began bringing in supplies from faraway towns, but competition for getting a bucket was fierce. Ravi, now in his late 20s, was running a small grain store in the village. It was barely enough to keep his own household afloat. One afternoon, a stranger appeared in his shop, a middle-aged man in dusty clothes, with a cloth covering part of his face from the heat. "You may not remember me," the man began, "but years ago, on the road to the school, I saw a boy feeding and giving water to an injured bird. That boy was you. I was passing through the forest that day and saw everything. It stayed with me." Ravi was startled. The man continued, "Today, I manage one of the tanker routes. I can make sure your village gets enough for the week, no payment needed." True to his word, water arrived the very next morning, enough not only for Ravi's family, but for the surrounding houses. That evening, as children played in the lane and women filled their pots, Ravi thought of the Meena again, the roti he'd shared, the teasing from other children. And he realized, kindness isn't a trade, it's a thread. You spin it into the world, and someday, somewhere, it returns to weave something good in your life. From then on, Ravi made it a point to teach the village children the same lesson his mother had taught him, often taking them to the edge of the forest for a walk. If they saw a tired animal, a thirsty stray, or a broken plant, he'd ask, "What is the small thing we can do right now?" Some gave water, some carried the animal to shade, some removed thorns from the path. And slowly, he saw the understanding grow in their eyes. Kindness is not about grand gestures. It is about meeting the small needs you see right in front of you, even when no one is watching, even when it costs you something. Over time, those small acts weave into the fabric of your life, returning in ways you cannot predict but will always feel. When you give freely, you plant seeds, and kindness, like the forest, has its own way of giving back.